Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes and stepping barefoot into the cool, dusty halls of a medieval Ethiopian monastery. You're not visiting, you're living this. The sun's just dipped below the high escarpments, painting the sky bruised pink and molten gold. The wind brushes over the stone paths carved into cliff faces, and somewhere nearby, a wooden bell thuds softly, calling you, and only you, toward the quiet. You're not here to talk. You're here to eat. And you're going to do it in silence so thick you can hear your own thoughts echo. Forget whatever you've got in your pantry. This isn't air fryer meal prep or oat milk lattes. This is survival at 8,000 feet, wrapped in a woolen gabi, and driven by a rhythm of fasting, prayer, and the occasional fermented treat that smells like last week's socks but tastes like heaven, maybe. And listen, your 21st century stomach? It's not gonna make it. No drive-through, no delivery apps. Just you, your hands, a wooden spoon if you're lucky, and a rotating cast of things that used to live in the dirt. You'll either come out of this spiritually elevated, or just really good at pretending you're full. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly along a narrow ledge etched into the side of a cliff, your back pressed to the cool stone wall as the path narrows. Below you is a dizzying drop into mist-shrouded valley. Above, jagged peaks form silhouettes like saw teeth. And ahead, built into the living rock, is the monastery, a shadowy sprawl of domes and alcoves that looks like it's grown out of the mountain itself. When you duck through the low doorway, the air inside is damp and earthy. You smell stone, dust, old parchment, and smoke. You're greeted by nothing and no one. The monk at the gate gave you a slow blink, a nod, and vanished into the gloom. Silence isn't just a practice here, it's the law of the land. The church bell, carved from a single log and struck with a wooden mallet, signals the end of the day's final prayers. It also means one thing, your evening meal is coming. Not fast, not hot, but it's coming. Your stomach, which has been quietly muttering all day, perks up. In the dim light, you shuffle past frescoes so old the saints look sunburned. A cat brushes your ankle, vanishes into the dark. You descend into the dining hall, a vaulted space lit only by wicks floating in small pools of butter. The walls are streaked with soot from 1,000 mealtimes. You sit where the others do, cross-legged, facing the stone wall. No one talks. No one looks around. Everyone waits. It's a peculiar kind of anticipation. You hear the soft clatter of clay bowls. A low cough. A muffled stomach rumble, probably not yours, but who knows? There's a steady rhythm to it all, as dependable as morning fog. The meals are always the same in spirit, humble, handmade, reverent. Outside, the sky has settled into indigo. Bats swoop across it. Inside, the deacon appears with a wide wooden ladle and begins spooning stew into your bowl with a precision that feels oddly holy. You don't thank him. That would break the silence. You simply bow your head slightly. The stew tonight smells of lentils and garlic, warm and earthy, like wet leaves and old prayers. You scoop up a portion with a ragged piece of injera, spongy, slightly sour, and torn from a flat round that's as big as a cartwheel. No forks. No chewing sounds. Just the soft rustle of fabric and the delicate slap of bread against bowl. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring every bite, but because that's the only speed allowed. The silence enforces it. It makes you pay attention. Every flavor, cumin, onion, fenugreek, feels louder than usual. Historians still argue whether the practice of silent dining in Ethiopian monasteries came from ancient Coptic rules or local adaptations of desert asceticism. Either way, the result is the same. Your brain goes quiet when your mouth is busy not talking. You notice the temperature of the food, the texture of the bread, the small miracle of salt. It's not that the monks don't speak at all, just not here, not now. This is a sacred stillness. You're supposed to taste the food with more than just your tongue. You're meant to taste it with humility, gratitude, and probably a little penitence for that time you swore at your cousin in the wheat field. You finish your portion without rushing. Nobody asks for seconds. That's not done. There's just enough for everyone, always. You gently wipe your bowl with the last bit of injera, fold your hands, and lower your head. The meal is over. A small bell rings once. Everyone rises. No clatter, no shuffling chairs. Just a silent tide of white robes and sandals moving toward the door. You follow them out, your stomach not quite full, your mind strangely clearer than before. Outside, the stars have arrived. Not just a few. All of them. The night sky looks like it's spilled a bag of diamonds. You look up and wonder if you've just had dinner in the presence of something eternal. Tomorrow, it starts again. The sun's not up yet, but you are. You wake to the sound of soft footsteps in the courtyard and the faintest creak of the monastery's wooden water wheel turning in the nearby stream. Your body still aches from yesterday's chores, but you don't complain. No one here does. You stretch your limbs beneath a rough woolen blanket, blink into the near dark, and prepare yourself for another day of fasting. Well, sort of fasting. See, when someone says fasting in medieval Ethiopian monastic terms, it's not just skipping a meal or giving up coffee. It's a lifestyle. And it doesn't mean no food. It means no animal products, no meat, milk, butter, cheese, or eggs. That's the rule for over 250 days of the year, which is most of the year. So, you better learn to love lentils. It's the Tuesday of a non-feast week, which means you'll get one meal today. And it won't arrive until the sun's taken its sweet time cresting the jagged mountains. Until then, you wait. And work. You wrap your white shama cloak around your shoulders and head toward the garden, where the monks are already gathering weeds, pulling root vegetables from the soil, and muttering prayers under their breath. You join them in silence. The garden smells faintly of damp earth and dried onion tops. A crow caws overhead. A beetle crawls up your ankle. As you bend to pull a carrot from the hard soil, your stomach whines. Not a roar, just a polite suggestion. And you remind it, as you've learned to do, that hunger is not the enemy here. It's the path. This level of fasting isn't about punishing the body, it's about humbling it, taming it. You're not meant to eliminate desire. Just teach it to wait in line behind prayer. Historians still argue whether this discipline developed directly from early Egyptian monastic rules or from indigenous spiritual practices that predate Christianity itself. Either way, what it means for you right now is this: you won't eat until well after midday, and even then, the meal will be small, warm, plant-based, and wordless. You finish gathering the day's bundle, some onions, a bunch of mustard greens, a few sprigs of something bitter you hope someone else gets assigned to. The cook, a hunched elder with a beard like a broom, takes your offering with a nod and adds it to the bubbling pot over the open hearth. You pass the hours in prayer, study, and chores. Sweeping halls, copying script, hauling water. There's a certain satisfaction in this rhythm, though your stomach is now staging a small protest. You ignore it. When the bell rings, you're more relieved than excited. You already know what's coming: a ladleful of kik ali cha, the soft golden stew of split peas, onions, and garlic. No butter, no cream, but plenty of turmeric and love. You sit on the floor again, legs folded, hands in your lap. The bowl comes to you, the injera again torn from the center of a large shared round. The sourness of the bread cuts through the richness of the stew, and you suddenly realize, you don't miss butter. Not right now. A cat, a different one than yesterday, slinks along the base of the stone wall, eyes half closed, tail twitching. It pauses beside you, considers asking for food, then thinks better of it and disappears. Probably wiser than most humans. You chew slowly, savoring the garlic. The texture of the split peas is soft, almost creamy, and the onions melt into the background like a chant you've heard so often you no longer notice its words. Just the rhythm. This stew, simple as it is, has held generations together. It's a spiritual glue made of legumes and faith, and it's a recipe that hasn't changed in centuries. Except for one fringe theory whispered among some old monks who say, a little too gleefully, that the original version used to have bits of river fish before someone high-ranking declared even that was too indulgent. You scrape the last bit of stew with your bread, mindful of every drop. There's a discipline to finishing your bowl without a single word. Not even a sigh. Not even a glance. Just bite, chew, swallow, breathe. After the meal, you bow your head. Everyone does. Then you rise, bowl in hand, and deposit it in the basin where it will be rinsed with stream water and set upside down to dry. No soap. Just friction, prayer, and time. As the sky darkens into its violet robe, you feel something shift, not in your belly, but in your mind. You're still hungry, sure, but you're also full of something else. Something lighter. Like you're made of fog and dusk instead of meat and worry. You retreat to your sleeping mat. Your stomach hums softly, like a spinning wheel. And as your head settles into your arm, you think, if this is what fasting is, maybe it's not about giving something up. Maybe it's about making space. Morning creeps in through a slit window, slashing a rectangle of pale light across the stone floor. Your breath makes small clouds in the cool air. You sit up slowly, stretching limbs that still haven't quite forgiven you for sleeping on a mat thinner than a slice of injera. Speaking of which, guess what's on the menu again? Injera. Always injera. But here's the thing, this isn't just a pancake. This is your plate, your utensil, your flavor sponge, your spiritual companion. It's the foundation of every meal, and honestly, after weeks of eating it every single day, it's starting to feel like a close friend with boundary issues. Made from teff, a tiny grain smaller than your willpower during Lent, injera starts life as a slurry of water and ground grain that sits in a clay pot for days, fermenting, bubbling, smelling slightly like a gym sock that found religion. But when it hits the clay griddle, called a midhead, it transforms into a soft, sour, spongy round that's half food, half miracle. You sit by the fire this morning and help ladle the batter. The midhead hisses when the liquid hits its surface. The smell is unmistakable, tangy, nutty, ancient. You wait exactly the right number of seconds before peeling up the edges. Too early and it tears like wet paper. Too late and it stiffens into something you could shingle a roof with. There's no clock. You just know. That's what years of repetition does. And it's the same every time, except for when the batter misbehaves or the fire gets moody or a goat chews through the woodpile. That happens more often than you'd expect. You stack the rounds in a woven basket, covering them with a cloth. They'll go soft and warm, ready to be unrolled like scrolls during mealtime. The monks don't speak as they work, but there's a rhythm to the task, a kind of quiet choreography. Hands pass ladles. Baskets rotate. Steam rises like incense. Historians still argue whether injera was first used by monks or became common through village trade routes feeding the monasteries. Either way, it's become as symbolic as it is practical. The circular shape, the sharing, the way it absorbs the stew, it's all part of something bigger. A communal act. A sacrament by chew. And it's endlessly versatile. You eat from it, with it, off it. You tear pieces to scoop up your food, but the base layer stays put until the very end. It soaks in all the flavor. That's the priest's portion, someone once joked, though not out loud and definitely not during dinner. But here's a quirky fact most people don't know. Some monasteries have been known to keep a starter dough going for centuries. A living culture of yeast passed down monk to monk like a relic. Which means, yeah, you could be eating the same microbial family that fed someone 500 years ago. Makes your sourdough starter at home seem a little underachieving, huh? Lunch today is yet another stew, this time made from collard greens and leeks, all ladled carefully over the injera. The greens are slightly bitter, which is probably a metaphor, but your stomach's too busy being grateful to care. The injera does its job again, soaking up the flavors, softening the edges. You sit with the others, back straight, faces serene. A soft cough. A breath. That's the only soundtrack. Well, that and the faint slap of bread against stew. You eat slowly, reverently. You started to appreciate the texture now, spongy but strong, tangy but comforting. The way the injera stretches just enough when you pull it. The pattern of bubbles on the surface, like tiny moon craters. Each round tells you a story of how hot the fire was, how long the dough fermented, how skilled the cook's hands were that day. No words. Just eating. But here's the twist. Some say the silent meal is also a form of resistance. In a world full of chaos, the quiet consumption of food can be a refusal to engage in anything but the sacred. You're not here to debate doctrine or politics. You're here to eat mindfully and not drip stew on your robes. Simple as that. Afterward, you help clean. The spin injera base is gone, devoured like the foundation of a good dream. The basket is refilled with new rounds for the evening meal. You wipe the stone floor. You stack the bowls. You sit in the courtyard and sip cool water from a carved wooden cup. And as you do, you reflect on how something so simple, fermented dough, water, heat, can carry this much spiritual weight. This much history. This much flavor. The sun is high now. Your belly is full, not stuffed, just right. Like someone lit a candle in your gut instead of tossing in a bonfire. Later tonight, the injera will return, of course. It always does. But somehow, it never gets old. Not when you eat it like this. Not when you eat it in silence. Evening slides in like a monk's shadow, soft and deliberate. The stone walls glow faintly in the twilight as you make your way back to the cooking hearth. There, the scent greets you before the flame does, a deep, rich aroma of garlic and slow-simmered spice curling through the smoky air. You already know what's on tonight's menu. What? Well, it's not just food. It's comfort cloaked in ritual. It's stew, but not the kind that comes out of a can or appears after 15 minutes in a pressure cooker. This is the real deal. Clay pot, open fire, hours of slow bubbling while the monks pray, study, and, let's be honest, keep a cautious eye on the temperature so it doesn't burn. You crouch beside the hearth, absorbing the heat, watching the thick mixture roll lazily in the pot. This batch is made with red lentils, onions sautéed without oil, and enough garlic to turn a vampire monk to dust. There's turmeric too, a soft gold glow that paints the stew like sunshine trapped in paste. What can be made with meat? Sure, but not tonight. Not during the fast. Which means no chicken doro what, no lamb tibs, no geese-licked indulgence. Just the vegan variant. But don't pity yourself too quickly. The flavors here are layered like a cathedral fresco. Onion cooked down until it loses its ego. Garlic sharp enough to wake the dead. And berbera. Ah yes, berbera. You've heard the jokes. That it's not seasoning, it's spiritual training. A powdered blend of chili, cardamom, ginger, and mysteries better left untranslated. When added to the stew, it transforms the lentils into something complex, heated, and slightly dangerous. One bite makes your nose run. 2, and your scalp starts to sweat under your head wrap. But you don't stop. Historians still argue whether the tradition of berbera dates back to ancient Aksumite spice routes or if it emerged from local experimentation with heat and preservation. Either way, this crimson dust is central to the culinary identity of Ethiopian monks. It's fire disguised as holiness. You help stir the pot with a wooden paddle as thick as your arm. The motion is hypnotic. Round and round, scraping the bottom gently, coaxing every bit of flavor from the slow dance of ingredients. The pot itself is blackened with age, coated in layers of old meals and sacred soot. Its belly holds more stories than you'll ever hear spoken aloud. Someone adds a handful of chopped mustard greens. Someone else tastes the broth, nods, and adds a pinch more salt. Nobody talks. It's like an orchestra where everyone plays by feel alone. When the stew is ready, it's brought inside, gently, reverently, and served in low bowls. The room fills with a soft heat from the steam and a kind of silent gratitude. You sit again, cross-legged, in your now familiar spot along the wall. The injera waits for you, its spongy surface already softening beneath the ladled what. You tear a piece and scoop. The stew clings like memory. You take a bite. First comes warmth, then a slow burn, then a flavor that doesn't shout, but hums, a background drone of garlic and spice that fills your mouth without ever needing to raise its voice. The monks eat slowly, deliberately. No one rushes. No one even makes eye contact. It's a dining experience without pretense, without judgment, without chatter. Just you, the stew, and the gentle sizzle of your sinuses clearing. Here's a fringe fact. In some remote monasteries, they used to test novices by giving them a what made with extra berbera. If you flinched or reached for water, it meant your spirit wasn't ready yet. If you finished the bowl with your face glowing like a lantern and didn't say a word, welcome, brother. You finish your portion. The bowl is nearly clean. Only a faint smear of golden red sauce remains. The injera has soaked up the rest like a faithful sponge, leaving you with a warm belly and the pleasant buzz of capsaicin drifting through your veins. As the bowls are collected and stacked, you notice something. There's a quiet kind of joy in this ritual. Not the loud, laughing kind, but the kind that sits deep in the chest, unspoken and steady. You help return the empty pot to the hearth, where it will stay warm through the night. In case someone needs a midnight sip. In case someone wakes with a chill and needs a reason to feel rooted. Outside, the wind rustles through the juniper trees. A night bird calls out once and then is gone. You pull your robe tighter and sit near the fire for a while, letting its warmth sink into your bones. This isn't just stew. This is history you can taste, silence you can feel, and faith that burns just enough to remind you you're alive. Your fingers are still tinged yellow from the turmeric in last night's stew. Even after washing your hands with ash and stream water, the monastery's timeless soap substitute. The color lingers. But you don't mind. That golden stain is a badge of honor around here, a reminder that you've eaten something sacred, however simple it seemed. This morning, you're back in the garden with the others. And guess what you're picking again? Lentils. Always lentils. These humble little pulses are more than just filler. Around here, they are spiritual sustenance, agricultural marvels, and culinary shapeshifters. If injera is the table, lentils are the main act, and they play a different role at every meal. Sometimes a stew, sometimes a paste, occasionally fried into little patties that resemble meat if you squint and really believe. You kneel in the dirt, fingers working through the rows of grain, yanking the pods gently, inspecting each one. The sun's not harsh yet, but it will be. Your knees ache. Your back hums with tension. Still, the rhythm is oddly soothing. Snap, pluck, toss into the basket. You remember what the elder monk said yesterday, in a rare moment of whispered commentary, a full belly dulls the mind. A quiet hunger sharpens it. You're still not sure whether he was offering wisdom or just making you feel better about the rations. Today's meal is what? Spiced red lentils. Again? Yes. Again. But this time, they've been ground into a finer texture, almost a puree, then fried lightly, without oil, of course, until they cling to the injera like thick paint. Historians still argue whether lentils were adopted because they were cheap and easy to grow or whether their appearance in scripture gave them a divine stamp of approval. What is clear, monks eat them with astonishing frequency and apparent enthusiasm. You suspect, after a few more months of this, you'll either achieve spiritual enlightenment or develop lentil-based superpowers. But here's the delightful, slightly absurd detail you learned today. Some monasteries actually assign nicknames to different lentil preparations. There's whispering stew for the thin soup served during extended fasts, and patience paste for the kind so thick it clings to your fingers long after the meal's over. It's not written down anywhere, but if you listen closely during cleanup, you'll hear them murmured with affection. You help shell the pods and rinse the lentils in cool water drawn from a spring behind the chapel. The water smells faintly metallic. A frog hops by, pauses like it's judging your shelling technique, and disappears into the brush. Back at the kitchen hearth, the lentils are tossed with onions, crushed garlic, and berbera, then left to simmer for over an hour. That's how the flavor deepens. No shortcuts here. The fire crackles low, its smoke curling into the rafters where it joins layers of past meals, preserved in soot and silence. The monk stirring the pot hums softly, not a melody, exactly. More like a repetition of breath. You find yourself matching your movements to his pace. Chop. Stir. Wait. There's no rush. Nothing else matters right now but this act of becoming food. The meal is served at the same time as always. The same room. The same low hum of quiet bodies settling into their places. You know your spot without looking. The bowl is placed before you. This lentil version is smoother than usual, almost velvet. You tear a piece of injera, scoop a bite, and chew slowly. It's spicy, but the kind of spice that stays in the back of your throat, warming you from within. The garlic hits next, then the sharpness of onion. Somehow, it tastes different from yesterday's stew, though it's made of the same basic elements. Like the difference between a hymn and a psalm, same roots, different feeling. You eat in silence. No scraping, no gulping, just deliberate, rhythmic bites. And in this rhythm, you feel yourself drifting into something deeper. A kind of edible meditation. The lentils, so humble, so quiet, begin to feel like more than food. They are teachers. They are consistency when everything else changes. They ground you. It's only when you wipe your bowl clean with the last corner of injera that you realize the room has emptied. You've lingered. No one scolds you. No one says a word. You rise, bow your head, and return the bowl to its place. Outside, the wind picks up. Dust swirls at your feet. In the distance, the goats bleat. One of them stares at you in a way that feels oddly judgmental. Maybe it's upset you're not drinking its milk. Too bad, goat, monastic rules. You sit on a flat stone near the edge of the cliff, the monastery behind you, the valley sprawled ahead. Your belly hums with quiet contentment. You're not full, but you're not empty either. You're balanced. It's a peculiar thing, how a diet so repetitive, so basic, can feel rich when wrapped in silence. When each bite becomes a moment instead of a mindless reflex. When you eat like it matters. Lentils again tomorrow? Absolutely. You wake to a strange craving, not for spice or stew, but for something sharp and crystalline. Something your teeth can worry at while your stomach figures out what time it is. Lucky for you, the monastery has just the thing, salt rocks. Yes, literal rocks of salt. Dug from the Danakil Depression long before the world had supermarkets, these mineral-rich chunks are a silent monk's secret between-meal snack. No chewing, of course, that'd be far too noisy. Just a soft suck at the corner of a pebble-sized piece, tucked discreetly into the side of your mouth like a sacred lozenge. You fish one from a basket kept in the corner of the storeroom. It's opaque white, rough-edged, and somehow feels heavier than it looks. You press it to your tongue. It tastes like the bottom of the ocean and a little bit like the inside of an old prayer book, ancient, dry, oddly familiar. There's something grounding about it. And practical too. The monks walk miles daily, tend gardens, carry firewood. Salt keeps you from crumpling like an old papyrus in the midday sun. As you tuck the salt pebble into your robe for later, you notice another monk walking slowly toward the animal pens. Ah yes, today's goat milking rotation. You follow, because hey, you've got a stake in this now. Not that you'll drink the milk, remember, fasting rules prohibit animal products, but the goats still get milked. If not, they swell like water skins and start glaring at everyone. You help tether one of the more cooperative ones. She eyes you with bored suspicion. The milking is done gently, with soft hands and whispered prayers. The milk itself is collected in a ceramic jug and set aside. Not for the monks, though. This is for the children in the village below. Or the rare feast day exception when rules loosen ever so slightly, like a belt after a particularly generous lentil stew. Historians still argue whether goat's milk was fully banned in all monasteries or allowed in trace forms for the elderly or sick. Some oral traditions suggest hidden rules, mercy loopholes, for particularly harsh winters or when the harvest failed. Nobody writes these things down. They just remember. Back inside, you clean the jugs, careful not to splash. Every sound in this place carries like a drumbeat. You think back to your first days here, when your spoon accidentally clicked against the bowl and 4 monks turned to glare at you like you'd insulted St. Tikal Hamanot's beard. You've since learned the art of the soft grip and the silent lift. Later in the morning, you help distribute today's snack, if you can call it that. Just a few roasted chickpeas, a handful of dried fava beans, and for those who need the extra boost, a spoonful of honeyed barley. But only if you've been fasting since the pre-dawn prayers. And not everyone qualifies. You do, somehow. The barley paste is thick and sweet, like a minimalist dessert. It coats your tongue with a warmth that feels slightly decadent, like being hugged by him. But the real winner today is the goat milk, because while you're not drinking it, you are helping prepare it into something useful, curds and whey for the village infirmary. You watch as a monk stirs the heated milk with a fig branch, murmuring words older than the alphabet. The milk separates, slowly, gently, until 2 things remain, the soft curds, which will be packed and wrapped in leaves, and the watery whey, which someone jokingly calls divine leftovers. A side note, in one remote monastery, you're told, they used to serve goat milk fermented with ash and herbs to help with demons of the stomach. Translation, indigestion. You're not sure if that's medically sound, but you're also not in a position to argue. The monk who told you this had no teeth and more energy than a caffeinated rooster. As the sun climbs high and casts shadows short, you return to your spot by the wall. You pull the salt pebble from your robe pocket and place it back on your tongue. It's smoothed down now, soft-edged. You suck gently, savoring its briny stubbornness. You feel hydrated. Centered. Just salty enough to feel human. Lunch is still hours away. But you're okay. Your belly hums like a quiet chant. Your limbs ache, but in a good way. And the silence feels less like a rule and more like a balm. You sit under the shade of a fig tree, the goats drowsing nearby, and think to yourself, who needs snacks when you've got salt and the patience of 10 centuries? You still kind of want a cookie, though. The sun lowers like a heavy eyelid over the plateau as you follow a trail of buzzing. It starts faint, like a memory or an old hymn, then grows louder as you reach the edge of the monastery's gardens, where the hives live. They don't look like much. Just woven cylindrical baskets stacked in a rock alcove, shaded from the harshest sun and guarded by a particularly territorial lizard. But inside, there's magic. And danger. And maybe, just maybe, mead. You approach slowly. No sudden movements. The bees here are as ancient as the stone chapel, and they take their jobs seriously. You watch as a monk in a layered hood lifts a lid with exaggerated care. The bees hum louder, but don't attack. They know him. He knows them. You've been told not to speak near the hives. Not because bees understand words, but because breath alone, too loud, too fast, can trigger panic. So you hold yours. You still your body. You learn to be invisible, to move like smoke. The monk removes a honeycomb, thick and golden. The air smells instantly sweeter, like crushed flowers in late summer. He breaks off a corner, lets a drop fall onto a flat rock, and gestures. You lean forward, cautious. One taste. Just one. And suddenly, silence has flavor. It's unlike the honey you've known. Richer. More floral. A little wild, a little fermented. It carries hints of thyme and eucalyptus and maybe even the fig trees that grow nearby. This isn't supermarket honey. This is monastic nectar. And sometimes, if enough is collected, it becomes tej. Tej is honey wine. Fermented with leaves from the gesho tree, a bitter shrub that acts as natural yeast, it bubbles quietly in clay jars until it's strong enough to make a monk wobble if he's not careful. Which is why it's only consumed on specific feast days, and even then, with impressive restraint. No wild parties here. Just gentle sips. Maybe a subtle sway. Maybe a deeply contemplative gaze into a wall. Historians still argue whether tej was consumed in monasteries primarily for nutrition, as a means of preservation, or as part of sacred celebration. Whatever the truth, it's clear this golden liquid plays a role far beyond just taste. It's a connection, to land, to bees, to time. You help carry a small harvest back to the stone cellar, where jars wait in the cool dark. You see several already fermenting, capped with cloth, faint bubbles rising within. The room smells of yeast and history. A monk points to one and traces a cross in the air. That jar's for Epiphany. Still weeks away. Tonight's dinner won't feature mead, of course. Not even a drop. It's a fasting period. But the honey? That's different. A spoonful might be mixed into barley porridge if someone's sick, or if the abbot has a toothache, or, in tonight's rare case, as a reward for a long day's labor in the garden. You're handed a bowl. Inside, roasted barley, ground to a meal, mixed with water and a single swirl of honey. You take a bite. It's nutty, barely sweet, just enough to wake your tongue but not enough to disrupt the sacred silence of mealtime. The honey doesn't shout. It just glows. The dining hall is quiet as always, but there's a subtle energy tonight. A softness in the monk's eyes. Maybe it's the honey. Maybe it's the relief of evening after a day of sun and soil. Maybe it's just the knowledge that the bees still work, generation after generation, without ever asking why. You finish the porridge, wipe the bowl, and return it. As you rise, you glimpse a scrap of honeycomb on the windowsill, left, perhaps, as an offering or just a moment of sweetness waiting to be shared. Outside, the stars arrive. Bold and bright. You lie on your back near the hives, careful not to disturb them. Their hum continues into the night, a lullaby of wings and work. A fun little tale a younger monk once shared with you floats back into your mind. In one far-flung monastery, it's said that bees once swarmed around a novice who couldn't stay awake during prayers, and stung him right back to spiritual alertness. You suspect that's more parable than policy, but still, you keep your distance. The wind picks up slightly. You pull your robe tighter, the taste of honey still lingering on your tongue. Sweet, sharp, fleeting. Like all the best moments of silence. The morning sun slants through the clouds in long, syrupy ribbons as you grab a hoe and trudge toward the terrace plots behind the chapel. This isn't some medieval CrossFit routine. This is survival. Every green leaf on your plate has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is the monastery's garden. It's not vast. Just a patchwork of stone-lined beds carved into the hillside, carefully tended, stubbornly fertile. The soil isn't rich, exactly. It's more determined. Like the monks. Thin, dry, full of rocks, but it still gives you spinach, garlic, onions, and wild greens you can't pronounce but eat anyway. You get to work. The hoe is older than your knees and probably better maintained. You chip away at the soil, making space for a row of mustard greens. The monk next to you works silently, rhythmically, like a prayer turned into movement. You follow his pace, trying not to lag. Nobody speaks, but you all understand each other perfectly. Historians still argue whether these mystic gardens were inspired by the monastic agriculture of early Christian Egypt or whether they developed independently from pre-Christian farming traditions. Either way, the result is the same: patches of holy dirt where sweat meets salvation. You pause to rub your lower back and glance at the patch of weeds near the irrigation channel. That's your next assignment: sort the edible ones from the ones that just think they're edible. It's not as easy as it sounds. More than once, a novice monk has accidentally spiced the stew with something better suited for a sheep's digestive tract. The trick, you've learned, is in the smell. Rub a leaf. If it smells like onions, you keep it. If it smells like soap, you still keep it, it's probably rue. If it smells like regret, throw it out. You collect a bundle of lemony herbs, a few tough-looking roots, and something that smells strongly of dill but might also be an early form of penance. Back in the kitchen, these will be chopped, simmered, or, if nothing else, thrown into a broth that's mostly hope and hot water. You remember a quirky detail an older monk once whispered. The monastery's longest-serving brother once claimed he could identify 43 edible weeds by taste alone, including something called prayer parsley, which no one else could confirm existed. But when you asked to see it, he just winked and offered you more stew. Today's lunch is straight from the garden: sautéed gomen, collard greens, steamed and then dry-cooked in a pan with garlic, salt, and not a drop of oil. There's no indulgence here, only honesty. You scoop it up with injera, of course, which now feels as essential as breath itself. The greens taste fresh, slightly bitter, and impossibly alive. Like they were harvested not from the earth but from a hymn. There's something bracing about them. They slap your taste buds awake like a cold river across the face. But they also satisfy in a quiet way. A deeply green way. As you chew, you feel the work of the morning settling into your bones. The aches, the blisters, the sweat that dried into your robe, all of it feels worth it. Because you're eating what your own hands pulled from the ground. That's not a salad. That's a sermon. And here's a thing most people miss. For monks, the act of gardening is prayer with dirt. You're not just growing vegetables. You're cultivating humility. Every weed you pull is a lesson in attention. Every seed you bury is a whisper of faith. After the meal, you help spread compost on the next row of beds. It's not glamorous. It smells like fermented goat opinion. But it's part of the loop. The sacred loop. Food becomes fuel, fuel becomes work, work becomes food again. The monastery cat watches you, unimpressed, from a sunny patch of stone. It licks a paw and promptly ignores you. Later, just before sunset, you sit on a stone wall beside the herb bed. The light is soft now. Golden. The gomen you ate still lingers in your mouth, earthy, honest, a bit stubborn. You pick a sprig of thyme and crush it between your fingers. The scent floats up like incense. The breeze rustles the leaves. You close your eyes. For a moment, you forget the aches in your hands. You forget the rumble in your belly. You're just one more plant, rooted in silence. And you think, this is the only place in the world where weeding can feel like worship. The morning light cuts through the small windows like thin blades, illuminating the soot-blackened walls of the kitchen. You approach the ancient clay pots resting near the fire, their surfaces cracked and darkened by generations of flame. Cooking here isn't some modern ritual with timers and gadgets. It's a messy, smoky dance between fire, clay, and patience. You watch the fire crackle, orange tongues licking the blackened stones. The pots, heavy and uneven, bear the scars of countless meals. Their outsides are coated with a crust of carbon so thick it could double as a map of the stars. Only this one tells the story of dinners past. You help shovel small twigs into the fire, careful to keep the flame steady. The smell of burning wood mingles with the earthiness of the stew that's been simmering for hours. You reach out and gently lift the pot's lid, careful not to burn your fingers. A wisp of steam rises, carrying the scent of onions, garlic, and that familiar hint of berbera. Cooking without modern tools means you rely on intuition. You know when the pot is hot enough by the way the smoke curls, when the stew is thickened by the way the spoon drags. You've learned to listen to the fire as if it's an old friend telling secrets. There's a certain charm in the imperfections, the charred bits that cling to the bottom, the uneven heat that turns the stew into something unexpectedly smoky. It's the opposite of a polished kitchen. It's raw, honest, and real. You remember an odd story from a visiting scholar who claimed some monasteries intentionally let the pots blacken to enhance flavor, almost like a medieval version of seasoning a cast iron skillet. This tradition isn't universal, though. Historians still argue whether the carbon crust was a happy accident or a deliberate culinary technique passed down through generations. As you stir the pot slowly, the thick stew clings to the wooden spoon, its color deepening to a rich mahogany. The clay absorbs flavors over time, releasing them back into each new meal. It's as if the pot itself has a memory, a legacy of countless monks who've stirred and tasted before you. Outside, the wind carries the faint sounds of prayers and distant goats. Inside, the kitchen is a quiet refuge, warm and fragrant. You lift a spoonful and taste it, warm, complex, a little smoky, with the gentle bite of spice lingering on your tongue. It's not perfect, but it's home. This is the heart of the monastery's food, simple ingredients transformed by fire, patience, and the hands of those who refuse to rush. You clean the pot with sand and water after the meal, knowing it will darken even more with time, adding another layer to its story. The charred crust isn't just dirt, it's tradition, endurance, and flavor all baked into one. The forest edge is thick with shadows when you slip away from the monastery, stepping quietly between towering acacia trees and tangled underbrush. Today's task is different, foraging. Not your usual garden fare or the ever-present lentils, but something riskier, mushrooms. It sounds straightforward, but here, in the highlands of Ethiopia, fungi are a serious business. Some are delicious, others deadly. You've heard stories, whispers among the monks, of novices who mistook a toxic cap for an edible treasure and barely made it through the night. Let's just say, mushroom hunting is both a survival skill and a test of nerve. You move carefully, eyes scanning the mossy forest floor, the base of trees, and the damp shadows between rocks. The smell here is rich and earthy, a mix of decayed leaves and fresh rain, like the world's oldest compost heap. You spot your first candidate, a cluster of small, brown-capped mushrooms with delicate white gills. You kneel to inspect, recalling the mnemonic your mentor drilled into you. If it glows, it's a no-go. If it smells like almonds, it's a maybe. This particular patch smells faintly of almonds. Your heart races. You pick a few, placing them gently into a woven basket lined with leaves. Each movement is deliberate, too rough and you risk bruising them, which could speed spoilage or worse. There's a fringe belief among some monks that certain mushrooms have spiritual properties, able to induce visions or enhance prayer. Skeptics dismiss this as superstition, but you can't help but wonder. After all, monks in many traditions have used natural hallucinogens for centuries. Historians still argue whether Ethiopian monasticism incorporated such practices or whether these tales are just myths born from misidentification. You gather more, careful to avoid the bright red mushrooms with white spots. Those are definitely a no-go, no matter how enticing their fairy tale appearance. By late afternoon, your basket is half full. Back at the kitchen, the mushrooms are carefully cleaned and prepared, sautéed with garlic and herbs from the garden, but without oil, of course. The aroma is heady and woodsy, filling the air with the scent of deep forests. You sit among the other monks in the dining hall, the mushrooms ladled over injera for a special treat. The texture is tender and slightly chewy, the flavor earthy with a whisper of something wild and ancient. You eat slowly, savoring the unfamiliar taste. It's a reminder of the world beyond stone walls and stone altars, the raw wilderness that still claims its place in the monastic table. But you're cautious. The memory of stories, of wrong choices, feverish nights, and silent recoveries, keeps you humble. You don't overeat. As you finish, you glance at the pot, grateful it hasn't turned into a scene from a medieval horror story. Survival here is part careful knowledge, part luck, and a lot of respect for the land. You return the basket outside, leaving a small offering of herbs nearby, a silent thanks to the forest spirits, or maybe just a hopeful bribe for safe meals to come. As the dusk settles, you feel the quiet satisfaction of a day lived fully, with the wild edge of risk still tingling at the edges of your senses. You settle onto the stone floor in your usual spot, the cold seeping through your robe, reminding you that dining here is as much about endurance as it is about sustenance. The room hums with the quiet breath of monks sitting cross-legged, each one stoic, their eyes cast downward. The silence here isn't just an absence of words, it's an unspoken pact, a collective focus on the sacred act of nourishment. As the deacon enters with the wooden ladle, your heart ticks up a notch, anticipation kept muted by years of practice. The ladle dips deep into the stew pot and lifts out a steaming portion. The deacon moves deliberately, placing the bowl before you with a silent nod, then quietly passing on to the next. You lift your piece of injera, tearing just enough to scoop. No clinking of utensils, no slurping, just the soft sound of bread meeting stew. The monks around you do the same. Every bite is measured, every movement purposeful. This ritual is ancient. The silence teaches patience and respect. It forces you to listen, to your body, to the space around you, to your own breathing. The absence of chatter magnifies the smallest noises, the gentle scrape of bread against bowl, the soft rustle of robes, the faint tap of a foot shifting. Historians still argue whether this silent dining originated from Coptic Christian practices or local Ethiopian ascetic traditions, but no one disputes its profound effect on monastic life. This quiet communion turns eating into meditation, transforming mundane hunger into a spiritual experience. Occasionally, a monk's eyelid twitches, or a subtle smile creeps across a face, small cracks in the solemnity that remind you everyone carries their own battles beneath the silence. Your mind wanders to the times you've broken silence in error, a whispered cough, a dropped spoon, each one felt like a sacrilege. Now, you move with the flow, part of the silent river. Eating this way also means confronting your own discomfort. The urge to speak, to share a joke, to complain about the bitter greens or the monotony of lentils is always there. But you hold it back. You learn to appreciate the pause, the space, the reverence. Tonight's stew is mild, a comforting blend of split peas and herbs. The injera absorbs the liquid warmly, folding around the food like a soft blanket. You savor each mouthful, the flavors subtle but nourishing. As the meal concludes, the bowls are quietly collected, stacked with care. You bow your head, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the food, but for the discipline, the silence, the shared experience. Outside, the night wraps around the monastery like a thick cloak. You rise and step into the cool air, the silence of the dining hall following you like a shadow. You think, perhaps in silence, the loudest conversations take place. Your mouth tingles, and it's not just from the cool mountain air. It's the berbera, the holy fire dust that seasons everything in this monastery kitchen. You've come to respect it, even love it, though it's the kind of spice that makes your nose run and your eyes water if you're not careful. And if you show pain here? Well, let's just say it's frowned upon. You scoop a piece of injera, fold it carefully, and dip it into the thick red stew. The berbera hits first, a heat that blooms slowly, like a small wildfire inside your cheeks and throat. You swallow, trying not to cough or grimace. Other monks sit stoically, as if their tongues are made of stone. Historians still argue whether berbera's fiery reputation was originally a test of devotion or a practical adaptation to preserve food in an era before refrigeration. Either way, it's earned its place in every pot, every spoonful, every silent meal. The stew you're eating tonight is a testament to berbera's power, thick, dark, and alive with heat. There's garlic, onion, and a secret blend of spices you'll never fully learn, mixed with red lentils and slow-cooked onions. Your lips burn gently, but your soul feels nourished. You glance at the monk next to you, who offers a subtle nod of encouragement. No words, of course, but enough to tell you you're surviving the spice challenge just fine. The sweat beads on your forehead, and you wipe it away with the back of your hand, careful to make no noise. You remind yourself that this is part of the ascetic path, accepting discomfort without complaint, embracing challenge without word or whimper. You remember the first time you tasted berbera, the shock, the tears, the sneaky attempt to hide your face from the others. Now, months later, you savor its complexity. It's not just heat, it's history, identity, and defiance packed into a pinch of powder. In this silence, you chew slowly, letting the spice linger, then fade, then return like a gentle wave. You breathe through your nose, trying not to snort or sniffle. The ritual is as much about control as flavor. A whispered legend among the monks says the original berbera recipe was a gift from an angel disguised as a traveling spice merchant. You smile inwardly at this, knowing it's probably just a story told to make the fiery powder seem a little less cruel. Outside, the sun dips below the horizon, and the monastery prepares for evening prayer. But here, in the dining hall, the quiet struggle between heat and humility continues, one slow, deliberate bite at a time. By the end of the meal, your mouth is warm, your spirit quiet, and your silence unbroken. You wonder, how many saints before you endured this fiery rite without a single complaint? You hope you're in good company. Feast days arrive like whispered surprises in the rhythm of fasting, a sudden crack in the monotony, a momentary loosening of the strict rules. But don't get too excited. It's not a feast in the modern sense of mountains of food and laughter until you can't move. Here, feasting means fasting, just slightly less. You wake to the distant sound of bells, a reminder that today is special, and so are the meals. Your stomach is alert, and for once, the usual stew and injera will be accompanied by something richer, something closer to the sacred. As the monks gather in the dim light of the dining hall, the usual silence feels different, charged with quiet anticipation. The abbot oversees the distribution of the meal, his presence a reminder that this day balances joy and discipline like a tightrope walker. Historians still argue whether the Ethiopian monastic feast day traditions evolved from early Christian celebrations or indigenous harvest festivals adapted into the liturgical calendar. Either way, you're here now, and it matters. You find your place as bowls are passed around. This time, they hold a richer thicker and darker, made with beans and lentils but infused with just enough butter and mild spices to feel like a blessing. No meat today, but the presence of butter and mild oil is a small rebellion against the usual austerity. Alongside the you receive a small plate of boiled chickpeas, steamed greens, and a sweet teff bread, denser and softer than injera, reserved for special occasions. You're told the bread is a symbol of celebration, an earthly reminder of divine generosity. You eat slowly, savoring each bite with more gratitude than hunger. The butter melts on your tongue, a silk thread weaving through the familiar bitterness of greens and the earthy warmth of beans. It's indulgent without excess, a feast that whispers rather than shouts. There's a quiet humor in how the monks manage feast days. They celebrate by remembering the fasts more than breaking them, carefully balancing the rules with a wink and a prayer. The abbot's eyes twinkle when someone jokes, silently, of course, about the feast that tastes like fasting. You notice that no one rushes. No one piles their plate. The feast, like every meal, is a sacred act of moderation. It's a theology written in flavor and restraint. Afterwards, as the plates are cleared, you linger for a moment, the taste of butter and spice still humming in your mouth. Outside, the sun glows golden over the highlands. The air feels charged with quiet celebration. You realize feast days here aren't just about food, they're about community, gratitude, and the delicate balance of earthly pleasures and spiritual discipline. You think, maybe the greatest feast is learning to find joy in the simplest of things. The whisper of a secret lingers in the air tonight. From time to time, when the calendar allows and the abbot deems it fitting, the monastery permits something extraordinary, hidden meats. It's like spotting a rare bird in the wilderness, a taste of goat or sheep, blessed and whispered about but never flaunted. You've heard stories passed in glances and subtle nods, tales of feasts where a morsel of goat was served, a silent exception carved out by long-standing tradition and spiritual necessity. Maybe it was for a sick monk, maybe it was for a special blessing, or perhaps it was just a rare nod to earthly joy amid strict rules. You sit quietly as the bowls arrive, your eyes catching the faintest glimmer of something richer than the usual lentil stew. A small piece of goat meat, slow-cooked with herbs and spices, rests atop a mound of injera. The aroma is faint but undeniable, a smoky, savory promise. Historians still argue whether these exceptions were formal rules written down or whispered customs known only to the eldest monks. Some suggest these moments are remnants of older practices before fasting rules hardened. Others see them as deliberate acts of mercy or celebration. As you lift the first bite to your lips, you hesitate. It feels like breaking a sacred silence, a whispered sin. But you remind yourself, here, even indulgence is an act of devotion. The meat is tender, infused with garlic and the warmth of slow fire. It melts on your tongue, richer than anything you've tasted in months. The monks around you eat with the same reverence, eyes lowered, grateful but restrained. This is not gluttony. It's a communion with tradition, a reminder that even ascetics are human. That sometimes, grace appears in the form of softened meat. After the meal, you help clear the bowls, the taste of goat lingering like a secret between you and the mountain air. You wonder how many monks have experienced this quiet blessing before you. How many shared this rare indulgence without breaking the silence? Outside, the stars spill across the sky in a vast cathedral of light. You breathe deep, savoring the memory of that single, perfect bite. And you realize, even in silence, some flavors speak loudest of all. Visitors are rare in this silent world, but when they arrive, they bring a splash of unexpected color, fruit from faraway valleys, dried fish wrapped carefully in parchment, and gifts that feel like whispers from the outside world. You watch as the gate creaks open, and a pilgrim steps inside, carrying bundles that smell of sun and sea. The monks gather silently, eyes flicking toward the offerings. These gifts aren't just food, they're tokens of respect, reminders that the monastery exists within a larger tapestry of life. You've heard that some of the fruits, sweet, sun-ripened mangoes or tart green guavas, are reserved for these rare moments when silence loosens its grip just a little. As the packages are opened, the scent of dried fish wafts through the hall, a pungent, salty reminder of life beyond the mountains. You wrinkle your nose but can't deny the curiosity it sparks. This is a delicacy here, one you're still learning to appreciate. Historians still argue whether the exchange of food between pilgrims and monks was primarily spiritual or practical, but one thing is clear: these moments break routine and remind everyone that the world is larger than the monastery walls. You find yourself nervously accepting a piece of dried fruit, the skin tough and leathery but bursting with sweetness. The monks eat it in silence, savoring each bite as if it were prayer. The dried fish, however, is a challenge. It's chewy, salty, and requires a strong stomach and a stronger resolve. You chew carefully, mindful of the silent dining code. Around you, other monks share subtle smiles, the kind that say, yes, it's weird, but it's tradition. Later, as the visitors depart and the gifts are stored, you find a quiet corner to savor a juicy mango slice. The juice drips down your chin, and for a moment, you forget the silence, imagining how the fruit might taste in a noisy market somewhere far away. You tuck the memory away as you return to the stone corridors, the quiet folding back over you like a familiar cloak. Food from visitors isn't just nourishment, it's a bridge. A reminder that even in silence, connections endure. And as you sit back down, you wonder, what stories do these gifts carry, beyond flavor? The monastery's rhythm teaches patience, not just for prayers or work, but for food itself. You've noticed how everything here takes time, sometimes more time than you'd imagine necessary. Take fermentation, for example. It's not just a step, it's a slow ritual, a lesson in waiting. You watch as the dough for tomorrow's injera is carefully mixed and set aside in a clay pot, covered loosely with a cloth. The batter bubbles and ferments for days, coaxed by invisible yeast passed down through centuries, as if the microbes themselves are monks, chanting softly in the dark. Fermentation is everywhere here. The sour milk you drink isn't just milk, it's an alchemy of bacteria and time. The barley porridge thickens overnight, the honey wine bubbles quietly in the stone cellar, and the dough develops its characteristic tang. Historians still argue whether the ancient monasteries developed these fermentation techniques independently or if they learned them from trade routes passing through Ethiopia. Either way, it's clear that patience, and a lot of it, is the key ingredient. You remember a monk explaining that to rush fermentation is like rushing prayer, it only dilutes the experience. Waiting transforms simple ingredients into something holy. It's a quiet act of faith. Sometimes, you peek into the fermentation jars. The golden honey wine bubbles softly, releasing a yeasty, floral aroma that hints at the sacred feast days to come. The sour milk rests thick and cool, promising a tang that wakes the palate without overwhelming it. You pour yourself a small cup of the fermented milk. The taste is sharp, a little tangy, with an underlying creaminess that belies its humble origins. It's medicine and nourishment all at once. And the injera? Well, you know that the starter culture is a living relic, a piece of the monastery's soul. They say that if you listen closely, you can hear centuries whispering through each bubble. This slow transformation mirrors the monks themselves, patient, enduring, shaped by time and faith. As you sit in the warm kitchen, the fermentation bubbles rising like prayers in the air, you realize, in this place, waiting isn't wasted time. It's the very essence of life. And you begin to understand why some things are better left to time. The dawn is still yawning as you wrap your cloak tighter and step into the herb-scented kitchen. Today's ritual isn't about food for the body but food for healing, the medicinal broths brewed from leaves, roots, and barks gathered from the monastery's garden and forest. The air smells faintly of soap and earth, a clean, green aroma that promises relief from aches and weariness. You watch as an elder monk carefully selects leaves from a bundle, crushing them between his fingers to release a sharp, soapy fragrance. The broth he prepares isn't something you'd order at a cafe. It's bitter, pungent, and a little unsettling. Yet it carries a reputation older than the monastery's stones. This is medicine, an edible prayer whispered into the boiling pot. Historians still debate whether these medicinal meals were influenced more by indigenous healing traditions or by early Christian texts on health and fasting. Either way, their place in monastic life is undeniable. You sip the broth cautiously. It tastes of wild herbs, sharp and cleansing, with a hint of smoke from the fire. You imagine it working its way through your body, easing muscles stiff from prayer and labor. Sometimes, the monks add a pinch of asafoetida or rue to the pot, herbs so bitter that they're almost poetic punishments for the body. You wince, but you drink it down, knowing that pain and healing often walk hand in hand here. One monk tells you that drinking this broth is like swallowing the mountain itself, strong, ancient, unyielding. You sit by the fire afterward, feeling the warmth spread slowly through your chest and limbs. The bitter taste fades, replaced by a quiet calm. You breathe deeply, listening to the crackle of the flames. This broth isn't just medicine. It's a reminder that nourishment comes in many forms, sometimes harsh, sometimes sweet, but always sacred. You think about how food here is more than survival. It's a language, a prayer, a ritual. And as the morning light filters through the windows, you feel yourself heal, in body, spirit, and silence. Night has fallen fully now, the sky a deep indigo, studded with countless stars that seem close enough to touch. Inside the monastery, the candles flicker softly, casting long shadows across the stone walls as the monks gather quietly for the midnight meal. This is no ordinary dinner, it's a sacred pause, a communion with the divine beneath the vast Ethiopian heavens. You sit cross-legged, the air thick with the mingled scents of herbs, sour injera, and a stew that has been simmering for hours. The silence feels heavier at this hour, like a sacred blanket woven from the prayers whispered earlier in the chapel. The food is simple but deeply nourishing, a porridge of barley and honey, warm and thick, carried from the kitchen in small clay bowls. You lift yours carefully, savoring the gentle sweetness and the comforting weight in your belly. Historians still argue whether midnight meals in Ethiopian monasteries were designed primarily to sustain monks during long vigils or whether they held a deeper symbolic meaning, perhaps a reenactment of the Last Supper's quiet intimacy. Whatever the truth, eating at this hour feels like stepping into another world. You taste the porridge slowly, each spoonful a balm for body and soul. Outside, the night is alive with distant owl calls and the soft rustle of leaves. Inside, your fellow monks move with reverence, each bite a silent prayer. You feel connected, not just to them, but to the long chain of monks who have eaten this same meal beneath the same stars. Their whispered devotion seems to ripple through time, binding you all in a quiet, invisible thread. After the meal, you help carry the empty bowls back to the kitchen, careful not to disturb the fragile stillness. The candles flicker low as the monks prepare for prayer and rest. You step outside for a moment, the cool night air filling your lungs. The sky seems endless, the stars a reminder of mysteries far beyond your understanding. Tonight's meal was more than food, it was a quiet encounter with the sacred, a gentle communion with the eternal silence of the highlands. You close your eyes, listening to the soft night sounds, and feel a profound peace settle within. Your stomach growls softly, a subtle reminder that even in this place of sacred silence, hunger is a constant companion. But here, hunger isn't just physical, it's spiritual, too. It is a form of prayer, a way to remind yourself of your limits and your devotion. You settle into your usual corner, eyes closed, focusing on the quiet hum of the monastery around you. The emptiness in your belly sharpens your awareness, making every breath a prayer, every moment a meditation on restraint. Historians still argue whether monastic hunger was purely ascetic discipline or if it also served as a symbol of solidarity with the poor and suffering. Whatever the case, the monks embrace it as a path to enlightenment. You think about the cycles of fasting and feasting, the slow dance between fullness and emptiness that defines your days here. Hunger makes the silence louder, the prayers deeper. You take a small sip of water, feeling it cool your throat but not fill the ache inside. You remind yourself that this hunger is not punishment, it is purpose. You sit quietly, letting the hunger wash over you, transforming discomfort into clarity. The growl in your belly becomes a chant, steady and sure. As the night deepens, you feel your spirit grow lighter, as if the hunger has carried away some of your worldly weight. You realize that in this silence, hunger is not absence, it is presence. A sacred space where body and soul meet. The monastery breathes around you, a living testament to endurance and faith. Your hunger joins the chorus, a humble song in the endless silence. And you wait, patient and still, for the next meal, and the next moment of grace. The last bite lingers on your tongue as the first pale light of dawn creeps over the jagged highlands. You sit in the quiet, the sky shifting from deep indigo to soft blues and pinks, the air cool and crisp with morning's promise. You reflect on the day's meals, the sour injera, the golden stews, the fiery berbera, the bitter greens, the sweet honeyed barley, and how each bite was a small prayer whispered in silence. The food has been simple, austere, but it carries the weight of centuries and the heartbeat of a monastic life deeply intertwined with the land and the spirit. Outside, the monastery begins to stir. A faint bell sounds in the distance, calling the monks to prayer. The wind rustles through juniper and eucalyptus, carrying the scent of earth and wood smoke. You feel a deep calm settle over you, a quiet gratitude for the discipline, the hunger, the silence, and the sustenance. Each meal here was more than nourishment. It was a sacred ritual, a moment of connection to something eternal. As the sky brightens, you take a final sip of cool spring water, savoring its clarity. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, the cold morning air filling your lungs like a blessing. This journey through the monks' silent meals has taught you that eating can be an act of mindfulness, humility, and reverence, a way to honor the body, the spirit, and the world. You rise slowly, ready to face the day with a soul quieted by silence and a body sustained by simple, holy food. Outside, the light spills across the plateau, golden and wide, and you carry the taste of silence with you.